St. Louis or beyond, or Kansas City, and then you're going to get to Denver, and then you're over. I think it's
But what you haven't identified is where you're going to end up. Is going to put the daughter on the trailways so that she can continue.
It's her car.
Oh, it's her car.
It's her car.
So he's got to go. Oh, okay, then you're doing the trailways.
You may get the trail. You may jump off in Denver and go north.
Yeah, well, she claims that she has a plan.
Okay.
And,
Where's she heading?
ultimately, Manhattan Beach, outside of LA, California.
South of LA.
It's nice. You driving?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've drove cross country. It's great.
It's a great drive. It's just a long drive.
Yeah, it's a long drive, but it's a fantastic drive.
I'm going as far as Salt Lake City, and that's when she's getting her friends meeting her there. And,
Oh,
Okay.
yeah,
it's a nice drive. It really is.
Yeah, I'm going to take this off.
I like that.
she even has podcasts picked out for certain stretches and stuff. and
Is
I'm like,
that so?
Oh, yeah.
That's too much structure.
Believe me,
I'm sorry, but
I told her, I said, what do you
Enough already.
Yeah.
Is she a control freak?
No, not at all. That's
That really is too much structure. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't take that structure.
And I was surprised by all that.
That's cool.
Yeah, so.
Recording in progress.
You know what, we don't need to record it
Okay.
because we're streaming it and automatically.
Really don't.
Am I supposed to be able to read this?
I know.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Is there a Braille edition to this?
I need the big print edition. Sorry.
I'm with you.
I really can't read it.
I keep moving over this.
Well, especially without the light.
I said, thank you for the light over here.
Yeah. Do you have the visually impaired edition of this printing?
Are you kidding? Because I said to Janelle, she said, what should I print, the notes page or the individual slides? And I said, the notes page.
Not enough.
Just
I'm
put some
sorry.
lights on here, baby.
Okay.
Thank you.
How about, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
we need-
That helps.
Oh, there is a paper here.
I mean, there's something on it. You knew you had paper.
Just be mindful that might affect Rick's ability to read the screen if we do something.
That's okay. You could read down, right?
Look, I just went to my eye doctor.
We're muted.
Okay, guys, are we ready? It's 5 o'clock.
Yes.
All right, so happy.
Mayor,
What?
can you please tell Janelle she's muted?
Janelle, you are muted.
Hold on, we're starting moving.
We can't hear you.
She's working on it.
Put you on speakerphone.
There you are.
Can you hear us now?
I can, but I need permission to share my screen.
Yeah, we can hear
Okay,
you.
we can now hear you. I hope you've got the large print edition of this printing.
I do. I'll reprint it.
You know, look, I just saw my ophthalmologist about 3 weeks ago, and he told me my vision was okay, and now I'm feeling like something's happened.
Yeah, that's the same here. He said it was good, but I don't know.
Thanks. It looks like Kayla's trying to get you to be able to share.
Thanks. I can.
Oh, good.
Oh, here we go. Hold on.
Well, if you're going
Oh,
to,
we've got a delay.
There you go.
a delay. You mean there's feedback coming through? Or you getting double voices, or what?
I'm getting double.
Oh, great. You want to log out and come back in?
I know.
You should have brought a...
You know, I have one in my drawer.
Jeez, what?
I use it during the budget cycle because Lorraine prints in small print too.
I know. The first financial report I said, she gave me, I said, this is not going to do, honey. I said, I can't even see this thing. I can do better with my glasses,
All right.
especially when it says vision for the city. We're in trouble. We're in trouble already.
Vision of the city council slides. Okay, guys. Looks like she's coming back in. Good.
I see Charlie O'Donnell's on. Or someone from his office.
Charlie's on, yeah.
I thought he was out all week.
He's out, but that doesn't mean he didn't call in and
Yeah, right.
participate. It was Janelle. That solved the problem?
Can we hear you now?
We can't hear you.
I know sign language, honey.
No, it just, when I come in, it automatically defaults, even when I say to join with the audio.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
We got you. Are we not double with you now? We're not?
No, we're good.
Okay, good.
I'll see you.
All right, so it is, looks like it's 5:05 on August the 31st, and we're here for a regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council to review and discuss the 2017 Comprehensive Plan in preparation for the 5-year review. And this is largely going to be Janelle, I believe, walking us through what we did in 17 and what kinds of things we might want to consider doing in the 5-year review. This is halfway through a 10-year, the plan is good for 10 years, but at 5 years, annually you do an annual update of what you've done, but then at 5 years you do a more comprehensive review of it. Am I right, Janelle?
Yes, you just stole my first couple of slides.
I'm sorry, that wasn't my intent. So, you know.
And are we permitted after 1 year or 5 years of revising it, updating it?
Sure, that's the purpose of this meeting, is what do we want to update?
So our 5-year review can be anything from sending a letter to the state planning office saying that the plan's still current, we don't have any major changes we want to make.
Right.
Or it can go to the other extreme and say, we're going to do an update. There are things that we think have changed that we want to address differently.
Yeah, exactly. And given what has happened since 2017 in terms of I would imagine that as we go through this, we'll want to make some changes. So, Janelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to take you back a little bit even farther and kind
Okay.
of go over like what a comprehensive plan is.
Okay.
I always say it's kind of the vision for the city. It's kind of what we want to look like. I always say what we want to look like when we grow up. And what it does is it then provides guidance to achieve that vision and how to get there. And that comes in the form of policies and recommendations. Now, a lot of some of those, the comp plan vision and the city and the zoning code and the other codes are the way the plan is implemented. So we have a plan, it tells us what do we want to look like, it gives us some guidance and recommendations on how to get there, and then the code, the zoning code and other codes are how we end up implementing what we want to look like and that vision for the city.
Right.
So as you guys know, it's every 10 years is when we typically do a new one. Sometimes you can, if it's going good, you just kind of re-up all the information. But every 5 years, you kind of do an in-depth kind of review. Are we going the path we want to go to? Is it going, where it is? A lot of people, the pandemic hit. Are there things we need to change? Or back in 2008, a lot of people had just adopted, 2006 plan, and they're like, growth, growth, growth. And like, well, recession hit. So, do we need to take a different look and make sure that those policies, that vision is still where we want to go based on what's going on today? We do an annual report to the state, kind of giving the progress on our implementation, on our recommendations. That is on the city's website, under the planning department, right under the plan. The plan requires certain topics to be in there. That goes from transportation, community design, utilities, housing, land use, population and demography, which especially for us is we're growing, and what is the demography of the population? So that could impact the needs and the transportation needs of the city. So it's called the 2015 Comprehensive Plan, but it was actually adopted in 2017, which is perfectly fine. Sometimes you need a little bit longer to get it approved, which means 2022 is our 5-year review.
If I could just interrupt, I think we're in a good position with this 5-year review because we have the benefit of the 2020 census. When we did the 2015, 2017, we were still working with 2010 data from the census, although there have been some updates. So we're in a better position to have some more current information as we look at this one. Thank you.
Oh, and if you have questions, just stop me. I'm happy to answer questions.
Haven't gotten
So
there yet.
one of the big things the comprehensive plan does is it designates the land use for the city. Land use is a broad category of how the land is used. So we have residential, commercial, industrial, open space. Those are all land use classifications on how land is used. Existing land use is how is this property currently being used, which is typically based on how is it zoned. And the future land uses, what do we want that land use to be in the future? So if we have, some commercial zoning or some residential zoning, but we think, it should be something else, that's when you plan for that. Now, one of the state requirements is that our zoning and our land use are required to be consistent. And if you remember with a couple of the change of zones you've reviewed lately, a comp plan amendment came through with it because the request for the change of zone was not consistent with the future land use plan. But that's okay because we have the ability to amend it. Not a problem. If you guys so choose to make sure it's correct. So when we get that, we make sure, so if you have an R2 zoning, your land use needs to be residential because they need to be consistent per the state code. So that's why sometimes you'll see, you won't always see it because sometimes somebody just wants to change a residential zoning to a different residential zoning. But when it's not consistent with the land use, that's when you'll see that additional ordinance to amend the comprehensive plan. So our plan is broken down with an executive summary. And then at the very beginning, we have our policies and recommendations, which is kind of like our implementation plan. How do we want to get to where we want to go? How do we get that vision that we've determined to make that happen? And then we have those chapters, that text of the body, that tells you what the demographics are and explains what cultural facilities we have. And ours is broken down into 7 parts. And they each go over, again, a required topic. So an example, part 3, is the existing resources and strategies for conservation. And what that contains is those following topics. So that chapter contains historical and cultural resources, open space and recreation, significant natural features, your transportation network, and your community character. Now, those 5 are just some of the requirements that we need to address in the comprehensive plan. So there's actually a really big list. And for what we did, we just put those together in that section.
Excuse me, Janelle, I have a question for you.
Sure.
When you mention that there are 7 parts, is that a formula that the state planning office has given the city, or are those 7 parts something that a former committee created and in turn was approved by mayor and council?
So based on, because I was having a conversation with Anne Marie yesterday, because it's a weird kind of layout. I'm used to doing each would have its own chapter. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do a comp plan. It's whatever the city wants to do. As long as you're hitting those requirements that the state has, the format can change.
So are those 7 parts part of the state requirement then?
They all need to
So
be.
these topics are required by the state.
They are required, okay.
And just, since I was around when this one was developed and lived with the previous one, actually probably 2 previous ones, the format we used in 15 to 17, getting that approved, was the same format that was used with the previous one.
Okay, so you just carried it over.
Yeah, we continued the same format.
Now, so
Yeah.
I think
That's
one
typical.
thing that Janelle's saying, that in some plans, you might have a whole chapter on transportation or a whole chapter on open space and recreation, but in ours, they all come in one chapter.
Okay.
And there's no right or wrong.
That's a reflection of the size of the
Right.
community. And,
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
got it. Thank
and
you.
again, no right or wrong way to do it.
Right.
It's all about how the community wants to present and put together their comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank
As
you.
long as, again, we're covering those topics, you're good.
Uh-huh, I see.
I mean, one thing that strikes me, and it's probably not as relevant to Lewis because we're smaller, is economic development. I don't see anything
And
there.
that'll be it. It's in there.
It's there.
Oh, it is?
I just didn't include all the topics.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Trust me, we will get there.
And that is a required topic, too.
That was subject of its own.
It's a whole
Yeah, figure.
Yeah.
section.
I just did some examples because the list of required topics is rather long. So I just wanted to give you kind of an example of some of the topics. So what I really thought we probably wanted to do today was kind of get down and dirty into the policies and recommendations that came out of the comprehensive plan. As we stated, this is a good time to take a look and see, are they still relevant? Are they still, making sense for what we're trying to do? So I broke down all the topics, and we'll go through them, and please, I'm just going to kind of give an overview, and then I'm looking for, some feedback. Does that still make sense? And some of them we've actually already completed, because again, we are almost 5 years into this plan. We have finished some of the requirements, some of the recommendations and the policies that have been identified, which is good.
We might have finished some before it was adopted in 17, because it was the...
Well, that's actually true, because
Yeah.
it took 2 years to get it approved.
Right.
So some of the things that were relevant in 15 were already done by 17.
Yes. So a good example is our community facilities plan. The policy is Lewis will continue to monitor its community services, facilities, and structures and make changes as needed to remain efficient and effective. And the recommendation was that the council consider reviewing the function and the role of all city boards and commissions. We've done that.
We have done
So
that.
I think that's good. That took the form of combining ARC and then the Architectural Review Committee and the Historic Preservation Committee. So now we have HPARC.
It also created some new committees as well. The African American Committee was created. The Public Art Committee has been created since all of that's happened.
The Joy Site Development Review Ad hoc
Exactly,
Committee.
yes,
I
yeah.
think I know I said that wrong actually this time. So we've done a lot of things at looking at different boards and commissions.
Right.
So that when we talk about community facilities, we're speaking of organizational facilities, if you will, and not necessarily real estate. We're not looking at plant. Is that correct?
Not typically, because
Okay.
again, we're thinking a little bit broader than that. And again, the recommendation out of that policy was to look at the roles of the boards and the commissions.
Right.
But given some of our discussions that we've had, it may, to
Right.
kind of follow on what you're saying, it may be very appropriate
Yes.
to look at
I think there's
facilities
the actual
in terms of the needs.
I think
exactly.
that may come in another part, but I think, yes, it needs to be, we need to talk about the fact that we're outgrowing City Hall and our police station, blah, 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 all the things we've been admiring.
And I'm just taking a literal interpretation of the word facilities. That's also in the policy statement.
But that would
And then
be,
maybe that's where we add a new recommendation
Right.
is to,
Right.
do an evaluation, which I think we've already kind of done on some of the facilities, about the maintenance and upkeep and need for buildings.
well, I think the other thing is about the inventory of property inventory. It would go into this topic if you're going to take it to that level.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Sure. I'm just going to take some notes because we need to add that one.
Maybe worth mentioning, like the reestablishment of the Capital Projects Committee.
Right. Well, and I mean, as we go through this, start to think about, as we do the review of the comp plan, we really need to think about what is the scope of the review. Do we want to do a rewrite at 5 years because enough things have changed? And And per the state code, that's really the planning commission's responsibility to write it, but I think it's important for the council to kind of set the scope and
Sure.
make sure that it is going to be what you need.
Right.
And let's back up just a minute. When the comp plan that we're working with was initially developed, there was a consultant that helped the planning commission develop it. So it wasn't something that was generated totally in-house. So they worked with a consultant through IPA.
That wasn't.
And also, for doing the inventory and getting that group back together, maybe, we just make note of that. Because again, is the policy needing to be updated? Or just do we know, oh, we've got more things to do, so we can go to the state and like, hey, we're also doing X, Y, and Z to further implement our plan.
So I think maybe under the community facilities thing, you need a policy piece, but you also need to say structures or, well, something to that effect.
Janelle, may I ask a question about our process?
Sounds like we need to beef it up a little bit.
Right.
As we go forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we can do that.
Tim was asking a question.
Janelle, I was just going to ask a question about this process that we're following this evening. I didn't come prepared with any notes or anything for this meeting, so I'm speaking off the cuff here, but and I'm reacting off the cuff too. And but my question is, are you, based upon our discussion this evening, will we be expected to then come back together, convene again, and then pick up the discussion again? I don't quite understand how robust a discussion you're prepared, or what your expectation is of us this evening. Does that make sense?
Mine is to get you guys starting to think about ideas.
Okay.
Because we're just getting started.
Right.
This is like the preliminary stages, so you guys can start thinking about, okay, does that policy for community facilities make sense? Do we need to change it? That sounds like maybe we do. And that's what I kind of want you guys to start thinking about and just bouncing ideas, because this is how staff, based on these policies, looks at implementation of codes, making changes to codes, looking at, different functions, because this is guiding us.
Right. I understand.
So to build on Tim's comment, maybe it would be helpful as we go through this and you make notes, if he could plug in, the kinds of things we are suggesting that we add, and then we can come back with having looked at that, and that we could have a more fruitful discussion.
Right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So when we're talking about the utility plan, we've got a position, one that's kind of ongoing, but just something to think about is that Lewis continues to work with the Board of Public Works to provide adequate infrastructure to residents and to the proposed annexation area. Lewis supports context-sensitive transportation improvements to improve safety and flood evacuation. The policy that we have for utility is Lewis continue to work with the Board of Public Works to provide adequate facilities to residents and the proposed annexation area, and will seek to protect its well field. Only the Board of Public Works can implement recommendations related to electricity, stormwater management, drinking water, and wastewater in Lewis. So that's the policy. So think about it, take some notes, let it sink in.
How are we actually doing this?
We'll keep
in
moving.
practice,
How's that
though?
sound?
Right.
Because this says only the BPW
Right.
can implement recommendations. And we have vendors that are operating stormwater ponds in Lewis, Delaware.
Right, and
every single
well, I'm also thinking about, there are aspects of our stormwater program that fall on the city, like street sweeping.
Right.
Blockhouse Pond is ours.
Yeah.
So we may want to make that a little less.
Assignment up to the
Right,
DPW.
I mean, because it's become very clear that we need to collaborate on stormwater.
Yeah. We need to
I
share.
think the word collaboration needs to be incorporated into this policy. Also, the fact that we've signed this MOU that we just did a few months ago needs to be put into this policy.
Right, so this may be an area that we need to make some changes.
Okay, I'm taking notes.
Good.
So again, these are things I definitely want to hear, and I definitely want you guys to and if you take notes as we go through, and I know you can't read what I printed out, don't worry about it. Just take note if you want, and then you can get them to me, and then I can put everything kind of back together where everybody's comments are, and then we can, if you want to get back together, we can talk about this again.
I'll take the blame for everything being printed very small. I thought it would be good for note-taking,
fine.
but I can't read it either. so-
Well, that makes me feel good. I mean, I just got an eye exam.
Hey, you know what, Janelle, I'm going to throw another idea out here as far as, this is, maybe I would call this a suggestion for position in the utility plan section. And I think it would be helpful if we had a recommendation, a goal set that we would, whenever a project is being developed in the development stage, that if there's an opportunity for conversion from overhead to underground facilities,
Oh, honey, I
that there,
just talked about that today.
that will in fact be, that there will be at least cursory study of that, of what that would take.
Okay, on the utilities portion,
Yep.
we'll submit
Just
that
like that,
portion to the BPW for them to
Sure.
respond to.
Absolutely, and it's something that we will work with the utility, with the BPW. That's,
part
I
of
fully expect it. Yeah.
So, that's
Right.
infrastructure money, right?
And something I've learned as a planner, and even the state will tell us, is we want to consider something, we want to investigate. You don't want something in your comp plan that says we're going to do this.
Right.
Because
No,
if you
just
don't end
explore.
up doing it, or
Right.
you considered it and said, or it didn't make sense,
Right.
the public's going to come back and said, well, you didn't do this. So what you do is you put in the broader language that we're going to consider.
Correct.
Look at something a little bit differently. We're going to recommend, we're going to investigate.
Right,
So
yeah, I
broader.
understand, thank you.
That gives you flexibility, because if it turns out like that doesn't make any sense, it gives you the ability to go, okay, we've done it, but it just didn't make sense to implement.
Yeah, we need the wiggle room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Comp plans, again, think of your comp plan as your big picture, what you're going to look like
That's right.
20, 30, 40 years down the road.
Right,
Yeah.
and I'm all about that, Janelle. I'm all about that.
Right.
So,
Can I
Go
make
ahead.
a comment? Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment on that because, we've gotten into it quite a bit on various projects through the years. And the first thing that comes up is that you're not only putting the electric underground, you're also usually putting cable TV, telephone, and
Right.
maybe another utility underground.
That's the difference.
That's really where a lot of the consternation comes from, to try to get all those utility companies involved in a timely and cost-efficient way. And it's already really expensive in downtown areas to put electric underground. As you move into like more rural parts of the city, it becomes, a little bit less expensive. So that's not as big a factor. There's still money involved though. But I did want to make the point that, when you go electric underground, you're also having to deal with those other utilities normally.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And that has been a major hangup in some cases, so.
So again, when you're thinking about your policies, and I think think broad, think general. You don't want to get yourself tied to a specific topic or a specific thing that maybe doesn't work out.
Right.
So that's why your recommendations say consider, to give you that wiggle room to consider it.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Okay,
that's,
we ready to move on?
please.
Okay, historical and cultural resources. The policy is Lewis values its historic resources and will continue to protect them through enforcement of relevant codes and supporting guidelines. I think I don't think, I don't know if you have much to change about that one. You guys will let me know.
Yeah.
Because I think we do all take historic and cultural resources to heart, and it's very relevant to what Lewis is.
Yeah, I think though the recommendation comes off because we've already combined the two boards.
Yep.
Right.
I can't read it, so if you say so.
Well, it says the plan recommends the mayor and council consider reviewing the function and role of the city boards and commissions as a recommendation.
Okay.
So we've already done that,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait, no, is that printed here? I don't see that in the
Yeah,
ball.
don't go with what got printed. I noticed I had a few items I needed to update.
She
Yeah, I
she
think
came
that
back with
there's
the
a
cultural.
clean
Go for it there.
That's where I
There's a
was.
few things on the slides that are separate, different from what's on the screen, so we should probably
Yes,
just go
it's the
That's what I was,
screen.
this, we're doing the screen.
That's,
Yeah, that's my fault.
we can provide updated slides tomorrow, right?
Yeah, that's not
Yes.
this. Thank
Yeah,
Thank you. I was just confused.
So when I triple check everything, I was like, oops, I need to fix that, so I apologize for that.
All right, let's move on.
Following.
So open space and recreation, the policy is Lewis is interested in protecting and considering open space opportunities where current and future municipal boundaries. I'm guessing you guys still want to consider that.
Yep.
That is something we'll be looking into. There were a number of recommendations. I don't think you guys want to go into all of them. You can tell me if you do. Some have been done, some we continue to work on. We continue to work with DENREC on kayak and boat and hiking opportunities. We're trying to work with open space requirements in the subdivision ordinance to align open space. We're looking at all of those.
The plan, this recommendation includes a reference to ERM. That's got to come out. We're no longer consulting with them at all. And we obviously have hired a full-time planner. So it probably needs to be modified to reflect that.
Well, and that's why that one's completed. That's what the little gold star on the screen is.
Okay, I can barely see that that's a star.
You're stuck with me at the moment.
No, but we need to say what, ERM is not a relevant reference point.
Right, so it's not completed, Janelle, and that we never did complete the changes
To the marine commercial
Marine
zone.
commercial. So yeah, some of them are completed, some of them are ongoing. I was trying to update
I
certain
think,
items.
personally, I think this open space issue is something that we could really dig into and needs to be
We
dug
could
into.
make it more meaningful?
Yeah, make it
Yes,
much more
make it
meaningful.
make sense,
I'm not
right.
prepared to have that conversation this evening, but I,
With Tim on that.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
I would suggest you attend the next annexation zones subcommittee meeting, because they, as part of the annexation zones, they're looking at the cluster subdivision ordinance, which is tied to the annexations, and they are looking at a more defined definition of open space
So,
and what it means for passive and active recreation in open space. So there is a subcommittee working on that as part of something that else they are working on. They don't have a date yet, so
Okay.
I don't have a date for that one yet.
This is a really important area, and, you've got a lot of stuff here, but there's almost all those recommendations have to be modified, because with the school expanding and utilizing all of their area, this is going to, the likelihood that we're going to be able to redefine what we have over there in H.P. Smith Park is going to become less available.
Well, I think what I've thought about is, really having a conversation with the school district about the long term of that.
Right.
Beyond the current lease, because we are making investments in property that is not ours, long term, the playground and all that stuff.
But the playground, yeah.
So,
they've made a representation.
We straightened that piece, we straightened the part of the parking lot out back years ago when we resurfaced the parking lot over there on DuPont.
right, but it's under a lease, it's not,
It's not under ownership, but we did a
Right.
lease with them, and I think that lease includes the playground, does it not?
How long is it? Was that-
the lease does, yeah.
The lease includes the playground and the parking lot.
Yes.
Because we did that because we were getting ready to make we were getting ready to repay the
Right.
DuPont parking.
Exactly.
And I will remind everyone that during the plan review for what will become the new Shields School. And also, I believe they've made the same representation for the Lewis School, that the school board is they acknowledge that the community uses the facilities and that they expect to continue that relationship.
Yep.
That's my takeaway.
So maybe one of the recommendations is more, something to do with, and we'll come back to a larger discussion about this, but mentioning specific Cape Henlopen School District.
Right.
Right.
That, we have to collaboratively work with them.
Doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, this is a good time to go, okay, is the policy still valid? And are the recommendations still making sense for the vision with the policy for the city? So that's when you just tie it all back together.
Right.
Are we still keeping with the policy and things change? This is why we do the 5-year review, to take a look.
Okay. All right, we'll take that up in our next get-together.
Okay. So environmental protection.
meet every night, every week.
I think here, I just want to, that Lewis is very concerned about the health of the surrounding environmentally sensitive areas and strongly supports federal, state, and county efforts to protect these lands through acquisition, regulations, and, because I apologize, I can't see part of us, and improve development rules. Lewis is working with its limited resources and authority to consider, adopt, and implement, and as feasible plans, processes, and projects to mitigate the effects of, I'm going to, hopefully says, flooding.
Yeah.
It says flooding, which I think we've been doing a lot of that, but does that policy still make sense for the city? Does this need to be tweaked further to not just focus on flooding? I think there's other things to think about when you're thinking about the environmental protection policy.
Right.
Flooding is definitely huge. We have a lot of issues. It is the #1 hazard in the state, but other things we should be looking at. And I think we've got an executive committee looking at a lot of different things.
In light of what's going on in Louisiana right now, I have all kind of notes on this subject matter.
So, and I think this is where, does this policy still reflect the needs of, as we're moving forward, as the city moves forward? And again, we're not just thinking the next year, the next 5 years. We're thinking 20 years, 30 years.
Speaking for myself, I think this is, again, something that we will need to come back and address at another meeting. I'm really...
This isn't a one and done. We know that this is opening Pandora's box.
This is a good start, but
about different things.
It's a good start, but I think we could modify this and improve
Oh,
it.
there's no question about
In terms of
that.
the things that are ongoing, can you just update on what's the ongoing of this third bullet point, working with state and county authorities to protect the water quality of the Canary Creek watershed?
I mean, I would say it's...
That's aspirational.
It's ongoing, and that it's not...
We keep having
it's-
conversations.
Right, it's never going to be a completed thing, but I do think it would be good to be able to point to some actual actions in that regard, which...
Well, the actions are, some of the actions that have taken place since the plan was originally developed have to do with all those lands that were deeded to us as open space when Canary Creek was developed. That, and so that's one thing that's been done.
We definitely have some changes in this area.
But
And we know the
Well, and I
second
think
goal
about,
will be...
we continue to work on the Phragmites, which improves the water
Absolutely.
quality as well. So there's little things. And I want you to understand, the expectation from no one is, there might be somebody out there. I always say, if you implement half of your recommendations from a comprehensive plan, you have done an outstanding job. Because there's typically, again, things change. So again, we're in a 5-year review out of 10 years. We're thinking, okay, those don't make sense anymore. We need, as we were looking forward, new things come up, which means other things are going to fall off.
Right.
And not everything, again, I've worked on plans that have hundreds of recommendations because it's like, take a look at this, but it's not feasible to get them all done, and that's not the expectation of the comprehensive plan, because as you go year by year, it's like, okay, maybe it made sense in 2015, 2017, but that one doesn't make sense now. So, or we just run out of time to get to it. But sometimes it's like, that doesn't make sense anymore. So, but this other one took top priority, so we focused on this one, and that other one just didn't make sense. So I want you to, think about that, and Charlie's got his hand up.
Mayor, I didn't know whether you remember what the catalyst for that Canary Creek watershed water quality comment or recommendation was back then.
I think the concern was the stagnation and what was going on with some of the ponds that were in the back of Pilottown Park, or Pilottown Village.
I guess one thing, though, I would point out is that each year we do an annual report and send it to the state planning office that addresses how we've implemented some of these things. I mean, one of the things we did in 2020 that is actually pretty significant in this regard is the purchase of the Jones Farm.
Exactly.
Because that does protect the headwaters of the Ebenezer Branch, which then goes into Canary Creek.
That's a very important piece. The other
And
thing,
I think also something that we did is the city adopted a wetlands buffer ordinance.
correct.
Well, it's the protection of wetlands. It also can then impact the impacts from flooding.
Right. I think
So,
the
and
other
that's not on a recommendation at all, but that ended up taking on a life its own. And that happens sometimes with the comp plan. So again, I don't want anybody to go, oh, we didn't get all, 5 of these things done, because again, we've had conversations, the wetlands buffer isn't on here, but it got done because it was recognized that's an important thing we need to look at. So
I would just say that the policy is, like, for example, I think Mark Schaefer's policy, or his intended policy for Sussex County is to get everyone that's on septic off of septic.
Right.
So that would seem to me more direct goal about protecting the water quality of Canary Creek.
And the environmental protection statement.
That's an aspirational goal for us to work with the county to make happen.
we can't directly influence those lands that are not part of the city. That
Because as properties annexed, they'll end up tying into sewer.
Right.
So again, just start thinking, do we want to just make this a little bit broader than just on the impacts of flooding?
Right. I think we also have to recognize, look, we delayed the start of this meeting, or postponed the start of this meeting so we could all go to the workshop that was held an hour ago on the bridge, that we recognize the bridge, we look forward or encourage that the implementation or the construction of that bridge be executed in just as rapidly as possible, or whatever we want to say.
Yeah, and that's coming from sea level rise and flooding, and they've taken a lot of those different, climate change. So, I think we've got a lot of work, sounds like, to look at environmental protection.
I agree with you on this.
So infrastructure and transportation, we've got a couple positions in policy. So again, just thinking, do they still make sense as we move forward? The first one is Lewis continues to work with the Board of Public Works to provide adequate infrastructure to residents and provide items. Lewis supports context-sensitive transportation improvements to improve safety and flooding evacuation. The policies, Lewis is interested in context-sensitive transportation solutions that respect the historic and small-town character, and that the road improvements are focused on safety and flood evacuation rather than on roadway capacity, and that we're looking at public transportation, pedestrian, bicycle options to improve mobility, and that we continue to work with other agencies and potentially create a transportation improvement district that would include the city. And then the third policy is Lewis is working to implement plans, policies, and projects to mitigate the effects of flooding, both coastal and inland, and that Lewis is actively working to improve its transportation network, enhance walkability and biking opportunities, and is working to expand the existing business district and create ecotourism opportunities.
One thing that jumps out at me is that it talks about supporting bicycling as a transportation option and encouraging bicycling. I think what we've experienced over the past few years is that the flip side of that is that we need to work on bicycle safety and developing ways to manage the influx of cycling that.
This has gone further, we've gone beyond this.
Right.
So we're now dealing with the issue of responsible bike riding and.
Right. So if you build it, they will come, and they've come, and now we got to figure out what to do.
Right.
So maybe this isn't going, we want to create more, which we probably do, but it's like also how do we, encourage the safety of those other modes of
Exactly.
transportation?
I was going to suggest in the position and policy that, I'm not even sure I see the word safety. Yeah, I mean, that needs to be there, and talking about crosswalks as well, and, which is part of the infrastructure, so I mean, I think there needs to be much more focus on safety.
Well, it says it's focused on safety and flood evacuation right up there. Yeah, right in the middle of it.
Yeah, the first one does recognize safety and flood evacuations.
I don't know why they would have combined.
In the second one, when it's talking about content solutions and that we're encouraging different types of transportation to improve mobility, that it sounds like we need to focus on education and outreach regarding safety.
Right.
Okay.
And that's working with the state as well.
Right.
Yes.
But you've got down here, in one of the recommendations, a master plan for signage. We've already got that worked out pretty much with merge, but we need to implement it.
We need to implement it. And the other thing that strikes me that's missing from here is it talks about, bike facilities, Del-Dot roads, these types of things, but, think about where our money goes and what we're spending our efforts on, and that's making sure that our roads are maintained in a responsible way. And one of the things Charlie and I are working on that we need to bring forward to you is then being proactive and looking at areas where the sidewalks need to be improved. And that's an important part of the network that just kind of doesn't seem to pop in this. It's similar to the crosswalks. The whole the pedestrian network is so important here.
Right. Yeah. That's true. But it is, but remember that Del-Dot is, on state roads, they are doing that. Well, the connection to the high school.
And that might tie
They're
back
building
into
new, but they're not
our
maintaining.
our inventory
No,
of
maintaining is not,
Right.
But-
of sidewalks and how they're looking, because I know Charlie now has an inventory of streets, and maybe we look at something to look at sidewalks and crosswalks and how to make
He's
everything
done
a
the
little bit different.
sidewalks. He's done the sidewalks, and we need to bring forward a proposal for how we address the sidewalk areas that need to be replaced. And then, per charter, that gets recovered from the adjacent property owner. So we need to kind of have a more
needs to get done.
proactive program to
Well,
address
you
that.
also need to make sure that as properties are redeveloped, that the sidewalks are refreshed to meet the current use. Because we have a lot of abandoned curb cuts in town that are just sitting there, although now it's the front door entrance to the front of the house rather than the driveway. Right. Okay.
The other thing on this recommendation is we ran into it again last night, and at least basically all of the subdivisions that have been in front of me since I've been on council is this idea of encouraging internal connectivity.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened once since
It's been opposed.
I've been reviewed. And again, this gets down to, and I guess Glenn's not here, but talk about this being the force of law, and Janelle used this as saying this is the guide, but again, what good does that do us to have this in here when we're not even considering it?
And I'll tag along with what Andrew just said. I'll remind everyone that last month with Max Walton, he told us that the comp plan, which has often been described as having the force of law, is actually to be thought of just as an ordinance. It's as pliable and easy to adapt and change as an ordinance. So the idea of describing it as having at an elevated status of the force of law is bogus, as far as I understand it now.
Interconnection is also addressed in the subdivision ordinance, so it is, but yes, there are places where it's not.
Right.
I mean, even before me, I think
So if it needs further consideration, maybe that's something we look at, do we encourage not just residential, but commercial, industrial?
And the trail that runs through there.
Hold on to now is what happens in open acres. Every time interconnectivity comes up, it stays. Every time.
Canary Creek had the same
Every time.
problem.
You can go that far back. Honest again.
So what were you saying, Janelle?
I don't remember. I feel like maybe that's something we need to consider looking at.
We did have the interconnectivity.
Because I've actually seen,
I mean, we have it here, but we're not enforcing it. What's the sense?
Mariners Retreat.
What you do,
Well, part of that is
the
a
one you
reflection
reviewed
of us.
last night has it in one location, not in.
Maybe.
No, well, it'd have to go to the county.
What was the maybe, what was that?
Maybe Schofield will provide interconnectivity.
Yeah.
So I know that senators tried to get their interconnectivity with governors.
and they did not.
And they did not
Right,
succeed.
and they.
What about the interconnectivity?
And the county then adopted commercial interconnectivity between properties.
Right.
For commercial properties.
Right.
And from my understanding is the planning commission for the county is taking interconnectivity incredibly serious.
Does that apply also to interconnectivity from subdivisions to bike trails to, the multimodal trails?
Such as last night.
Because what I want to share with everyone is, if you go down the Breakwater Trail towards Gills Neck Road, there, and you drive past a section of Schofield, they have gates there that you have to have special keys to get it through. The public is not allowed into that community. They have connectivity for their residents to get in and out, but none of us can go
You're
through
talking
those
about
gates.
in the undeveloped portion of White Meadows Pond.
No, I'm talking about
in
the
the
existing
county portion
Schofield
of
community
Schofield.
in
There
Sussex County.
There's history to that.
There's always
There's a lot
history
of
here in
history to
Lewis.
that.
There's always history, and that
Yes.
becomes the precedent. That becomes precedent.
So we have it, but we're not doing anything about it.
Well,
Well,
we
that's
can't do
county.
anything about Schofield, that's
No,
county.
that's true, that's true.
Right, and if a
Janelle-
private HOA wants to restrict
Last night was just a perfect
in the
example.
county,
Right.
what goes on in their development, they have that ability. If it's a condition of approval from the city that they provide some type of connection, then it would become a condition of approval, and the only way to get rid of that would then be to get mayor and council to agree to remove that condition.
That's right.
As you guys have the final authority on approvals of subdivisions.
I understand that,
And all the
Janelle.
conditions.
Right, I understand that.
Another good example of where there was no interconnectivity had to do with Canary Creek going out to Harbor Point.
Right.
Every time you think of the place,
That's one, the
same.
stub is there,
Right.
okay? Okay.
Okay,
It becomes
so
mine.
community design, we've got Lewis values its small town and historic fabric, as stated in its core values. The existing historic district regulations and guidelines and proposed context-sensitive development and transportation improvements will support Lewis's community character. And again, this is,
Read, it's
That's why you can't read this.
It's easier to read behind you.
Yep, it is.
yeah, I promise that tomorrow I will have new
We'll just bring you,
bigger ones for you guys to see. And again, some of them are providing curbs and sidewalks to existing streets where appropriate. And I think this is where we can add that and make sure they're updated.
And you know what else I
This
would
was a lot
suggest,
of
Janelle?
historic, which was doing inventories of residential and commercial properties within the historic district.
And you know what else? Let me jump in here. It might be that we want to create some incentives that would empower developers or property owners to, in fact, participate in this idea of constructing this interconnectivity or the community character, the sidewalks and so forth, these transportation improvements that are suggested in this community design. correct? Wouldn't that be
You can
possible?
definitely you can put that as a recommendation to consider.
Correct. Please put
Yeah.
that down on your list.
Incentives.
Well,
got it.
I think you've got the issue of the inventory of properties has been ongoing for several years now.
Yes.
So it's at this point, it's not no longer a recommendation that you do it, but that you implement it.
Right, and that we utilize it in our
Right.
A review process.
In our review process, yes, exactly.
I have just, I think, a very simple question. I don't really understand, it says continue
Need to update inventory. What does that mean, update inventory?
So it really, I think the wording is probably not appropriate. It's actually updating the survey of buildings within the historic district, and that's where
They go out, and the University of Delaware Center for Historic Architecture and Design is doing this for us, where they go out and they look at the properties, they determine when it was built, is it a contributing structure in the district or not?
Okay.
They do measurements, they,
It's a field study.
So, then beyond that, there also is further implementation that could be done as building permits are drawn.
Right.
You know, you could then, and we now have a system where all these properties are identified, which we didn't have back when the 2000 plan existed.
Right.
2010 plan existed. But we do have a
Okay,
plan.
I understand that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll work on that one.
What was the
Jump to
third one, by the
redevelopment,
way?
if that's okay.
Initiate an updating of commercial properties within the historic district, is that?
I think
Same idea.
It's versus the H part.
Same?
I'm not the H part.
So when, you know,
Oh, so it's a survey, it's the same.
It's the same.
It doesn't mean that you should be updating your properties.
no,
No, I meant updating the records of,
Right.
you know.
it's updating the files.
Yeah, all right.
But again, it's really the same as the one before it, only residential.
Residential. And that was put in because of,
Targeted at like,
no,
we were behind the times or something, okay.
well,
But just update the inventory.
Yeah, update the inventory because, you know, there's been a lot of renovation that's gone on in the last 10 years in commercial properties downtown.
Yeah, that's all it means.
Okay. All right, next topic.
Okay, so we're into redevelopment. Lewis has identified the Lewis Beach commercial area as being in need of redevelopment. A study has been completed, and the study has received the recommendations. Does that still make sense for redevelopment? Is that
study
wanna
embedded
focus on
in this?
redevelopment?
Yeah.
I think those are
don't
things
think I've ever seen
you definitely want to take into consideration.
Right.
I feel like it's on the
But it
website.
should
It's on the
be,
website.
yeah.
I know it's a very important point. Rick, and I don't know whether you know it, or Janelle, but Rick Quill is here with us, so this is a topic that he may want to comment on as
Right,
well.
so if you go to the website under Government, Departments, Planning and Development, and then you scroll down, hold on, why can't I find it?
What are you looking for?
You know what?
It's not on here, the ERM is not on here.
It's really not? It used to be.
Right,
They may have gotten deleted. But this, I think all these recommendations on this section need to be completely rethought. You know,
right, I agree, including the position.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, it sounds like we need to reevaluate the position policy for this one, so
Yep.
I think we'll just, I'm just gonna skip ahead to housing.
Okay.
I don't want to keep you
Rick,
guys
did you want to
too long.
comment anything on that before we go further?
Just briefly.
Please, come on to the mic and make your comment.
Thank you. Rick Quill, 407 East Market Street and 203 East Savannah Road. This is a very important topic for me. I mean, I just spent most of the day reading the comp plan, and it states over and over again, I can't tell how many times I wrote them down, about the redevelopment of the Lewis Beach side of town, the Savannah Road corridor, marine commercial in particular, that this town has spent, I don't know, a considerable amount of money in a consulting fees to talk about that side, our side of town is. And the only thing I want to point out too, because there's a lot of things, nothing stays the same. It's organic. We all understand that. So this is terrific. You guys are all doing this. It's a very tedious endeavor, but it's much appreciated. But from a property owner's standpoint is not only we have the comp plan and the zoning, and it's all interconnected, also that third component is the people who own the properties, whether they're residential or commercial, whatever.
Right, that's right.
And my only concern is that they should be included, and I believe if they are, I think there can be compromises. I think when I draw the line in the sand and I get really, and you guys have seen it, upset or angry, it's because I don't feel I'm being heard. That doesn't mean, maybe sometimes the way I approach it isn't the best way to get a compromise, but I can assure you that I'd be more than happy to compromise and sit down with a dialogue. And in this particular situation is, the comp plan specifically says over and over again about the redevelopment on the beach side of town, the commercial properties, but it also states about the scarcity of those resources. And and we're not even at that point yet, because I try to minimize my interaction now, because I think we're moving in the right direction, is that there's a minimum amount, and if we have any new ordinances that are in play, whether it's, the redoing the swap ordinance or the rising sea level ordinances, that in one of the meetings, the planning commission meeting, when they said, and this has not happened because you put a moratorium on it, that the commercial properties would be subject to the same land use reduction, footprint reduction as residential. And I think Mr. Hockner, or am I saying it wrong?
No,
you got it.
You got it.
Said in that meeting, you can go back and zoom it and read it, he said that'll be a problem, but it was completely glazed over. And I think that, so I'm just telling you from that point of view is that I have great concern over, but I'm always willing to sit down and talk with a resolution, because I believe, like I said, the comp and zone plan, but I believe in my neighbors, and I believe in their viability, and whatever's done, I always look to do something in context with my neighbors.
Okay, thanks, Rick. And we're glad you took time to come tonight. Yeah, it's just a matter of, we want this to be an open discussion, and appreciate you taking time.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All right, Janelle, let's move on.
Okay, housing. Lewis recognizes the importance of affordable housing within the greater Lewis area. As the build-out coastal community, Lewis's ability to address affordable housing issue on its own is limited. They'd be willing to, especially in conjunction with redevelopment or annexation proposals, to explore opportunities to meet residential housing needs that are consistent with the defined comprehensive policies. So we're trying to recognize how do we work with, affordable housing and get that addressed in the city. And then the policy is Lewis recognizes the need for the development of additional affordable workforce housing in the greater Lewis area, and will consider opportunities consistent with the defined city policies to work as an effective partner on behalf of current and future residents. So I think a bright point in here is Dutchman's Harvest has been approved as a site plan, and that has an affordable workforce housing component to it, which I think is good. But are there other things that we should be looking at for the policy and position to
I'd like to recommend
encourage that? Or are there different housing items that we need to take a look at?
I'd like to recommend something for discussion as a recommendation. I think I've had this discussion with some of you. We all know that there are these garage apartments that exist here and throughout Lewis. Right now, a lot of them are underground. We don't know if they're safe. We don't know if the electricity or plumbing is done to code, but they exist. People are living there. And in some ways, they're sort of the last attainable affordable housing for people. And I would like to look at recommending that maybe we have a period of sort of amnesty when we look at these things. We have inspections, make sure that they are up to code. Maybe if things that are missing, that are required to bring them up to standard, make those improvements, and that would be something I would like to explore.
Okay. That can be explored. I think we also need to recognize, I think this whole policy needs to be rewritten, because I think we need to recognize that we can't do this alone, and I think if you consider what is going on at Dutchman's Harvest, the partnership with the Diamond State Land Trust to try to make housing more affordable needs to be recognized in this particular, this is something the city cannot, it's going to have to be a collaborative effort between the county, the city, and other institutions that can help bring the cost of housing down. So I think this whole policy on affordable housing needs to be carefully rethought to identify that this is beyond us.
And if you recall, it was this piece of the comp plan that kind of delayed the acceptance of the plan by the state for about a year.
Exactly.
And I think that we got it to where it was acceptable to both the city and the state, but and I think it did, that framework did position us to be able to point to the comp plan as we looked at Dutchman's Harvest and say that this is what we agreed to do. However, I think we could look for an opportunity to do something that's more meaningful.
I completely agree, but we need to own the fact that this is not something that the city can carry on our own.
Agreed, and I would recommend 2 more partners that could be BB with maybe some school nursing housing to increase maybe their ability to create some dormitories maybe over there, and same for improving the housing situation for University of Delaware graduate students. It's like, what, old prisoner of war barracks or something, right?
Not prisoner of war. It was,
Something similar.
I thought that it was for servicemen, but
You also have dorms on campus.
Old barracks.
There's no dorms on campus.
I believe there are, and there are some in the back section.
Few, very few.
There's some housing on campus.
Associated with the.
But nonetheless, it's a partner that we
But that's
can work
all,
with.
those are hotel rooms.
Right. Right.
They're hotel rooms.
Right, that's why you said dormitory, which is.
Kind of like the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hotel, it was a conference.
They might have abandoned the conference center business. I don't know what the university is doing.
It's being looked at right now.
Yeah.
They're looking, in terms of what do they want to do, because I've been in those rooms, and they are right out of 1980, or maybe 1970.
I'll get my bell bottoms and go there.
And your love beads or something.
My flowers in the hair.
If you go to the graduate housing, you step back even further.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's really primitive.
Yeah, so.
Really primitive. But getting back to what Andrew said, speaking about housing, there is value in what he has suggested. Sure. And I think that it is something that we need to consider, and we need to consider it out in the open, because this is a practice that's found in many communities here, many neighborhoods in the city, and the idea of an amnesty, of a moratorium, whatever, I think it would make sense for us to have that discussion.
Well,
not be afraid of it.
It kind of goes along with the effort that Anne Marie has started and Ellen Lorraine to identify sub-rows of Airbnbs that we're not collecting the gross rental receipts tax on.
And that will be our next workshop, which will be September, where we will talk about how, and this ties, it ties right into that question about affordable-ish housing, is differentiating it in terms of our regulatory and licensing framework.
That's right.
Having a differentiation between your short-term rentals and your long-term rentals.
Yep.
Because the long-term rentals are some of the only real affordable
It is the only
opportunities.
affordable housing we have. We don't have affordable housing that people own.
Trust me. I've been watching it, and
I mean, if you read the census data that I shared with you, which I know you have, you know that the mean price of a housing here is out of reach of a lot of people.
Right. But isn't it, I'm reading this, and isn't it a success that should be acknowledged is Dutchman's Harvest?
I think absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
that's,
we had willing partners, and the city,
But see, Dutchman Harvest would not be affordable had it not been the land trust.
Right.
Right, but nonetheless, it is affordable.
But, I mean, that was one of the things that when they did, when Preston Shell came to us with this, and just to give a little background on how we got there, because, you know, it really started when Preston Shell brought that property in and looked at, the application was to rezone the Kings Highway side for the assisted living, which council did, and the Savannah Road side is limited commercial.
Right.
And it was the planning commission that
That
said,
reverted, no.
we don't think it should be commercial. We think that you should look for an opportunity to do some sort of workforce housing. And he took that to heart, and he came back, and we had a lot of kind of, you know, roll up the sleeves conversations, and, you know, Tom West was here at the time too, and we directed him, or pointed him in the direction of some potential partners, MCall being one of them, and they connected him with the land trust. So part of it is just, we were very fortunate that we had a developer who was open to the idea, a planning commission that suggested it, and then at the staff level, we tried to work to you know, find an opportunity for partnerships. All we did was kind of facilitate. We didn't, but then, you know, we tried to make sure we didn't keep throwing up obstacles.
Right. Okay. And that's a great example of partnering.
Right.
And the fact that the Planning Commission, I love the idea, and I'm glad you reminded me of this fact. That's a great example of the Planning Commission planning. You know, we rarely see examples of that, but that is a terrific example and should be held up as such.
All right. Okay. I think we can agree that, and we have to be careful about using the word affordable versus workforce.
Workforce, right. That's true.
There's a big difference between
Can have a
affordable and
negative
workforce.
connotation there.
It's going to be 80% of annual median income.
Okay, well, then we need to, in this, we need
We need to define it.
to define it.
We'll work on
We
this
can-
one.
And again, I mean, there's probably more information in the text. This is just the highlights of
Right.
how we implement and what we're looking for in the
Yeah,
comp
I
plan.
get it, but that's a definition we need to, because we get hung up on that all the time.
Right.
Yes. So economic development is Lewis will maintain its historic business district and support major employers. The city has an interest in ecotourism opportunities and economic redevelopment. And Lewis is working to implement plans, processes, and projects to mitigate the effects of flooding, both coastal and inland. Lewis is working to enhance its walkability and biking opportunities and create ecotourism opportunities.
The one thing that
Walkability and
strikes,
biking down.
what's that?
I said we've got the walkability and biking down.
Not necessarily safe walking, but.
The thing that strikes me that's missing, and I guess I'm thinking of Khalil, and a lot of what you've been trying to work on is working with the University of Delaware to, I don't know, find opportunities to use the university campus as a catalyst for economic development.
Not the university campus, but the universities.
That's true, right.
Yeah, efforts, whatever we're going to call it, but, you know, we don't want to utilize the university's campus.
Right, leverage the university's presence in the community.
Exactly. Good, well said, thank you. Again, this talks about ERM recommendations regarding marine commercial district. That all needs to be updated,
Yeah, it's old.
you know.
And again, don't worry about having to update everything. Because again, it's okay if you don't do certain things.
Right.
Again, don't worry about it. If things just stay there, that's okay. It's what, are we still moving forward into the vision that the plan has identified? Are we still moving forward with the policies that have been identified? Because again, you know, you can add, but maybe 2-3 years from now, something might come back that's currently in there to like, oh, maybe we should take a look at marine commercial again or something like that. So just think about it like that.
I think one of the other things we need to think about is recognizing, again, I'll use the word collaboration of the use of the canal. As we have now, as Rehoboth now has a docking facility, what can we do to promote the economic development or the economic synthesis or synergy between the two communities through the utilization of the bike trails and the water taxi or whatever. And I think that should be part of this economic development thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm actually so as part of the plan, we have some areas of concern. And this is really where there's concern about what's going on in Sussex County versus what's going on in the city of Lewis. And then improving our MOU between the two of them regarding our designated area of concern. And then it's also increasing our intergovernmental coordination. So I'm not sure how much you want to change that, because to me it seems like we definitely want to continue to do this. But definitely tell me if you want to think about it, if there's things to change here.
I have an observation, and I think I made this as a comment to the county when they did their comp plan. And the county maps the area around municipalities as town center, where they want to put their higher density and higher intensity land uses. And my observation, and I feel like we made this comment to the county when they did their comp plan, is that given the scale of the uses that we have in Lewis, that puts on our border scale that is incompatible with what we have in town. And I don't know how to resolve that.
Well, I mean, what you're referring to goes back to the state strategies program that was developed under the Miller administration, where they looked at cities and wanted to do cluster development around residential communities.
But the whole idea was that it should be compatible with those communities.
I think the compatibility thing is the piece.
And that's not
It's not happening.
realized. Yeah.
I think in this...
Charlie has a comment.
What? Charlie has a comment? Okay. Charlie?
Yeah, I don't know if it's too late or too far down the road, but one way that the city can gain control of the development that's on its borders is to procure the water and sewer service rights for any remaining land that's not been developed yet.
Yeah,
I think that's
all been done.
I think 20 years ago.
No, it hasn't all been done.
Governors and senators and all those were going to be developed. The board at that time, the Board Public Works Board at that time, decided not to serve them, and it fell completely into the hands of the county, Tidewater, and Sussex County Sewer Service. So, the city lost control of whatever development happened along Gills Neck Road. Obviously, we've got some areas on the new road corridor that, are open to development and elsewhere, but I just think that's a way that you can gain some control, especially now with the pre-annexation requirement.
Thank you, Charlie. That dovetails into another conversation that will come up later.
That's further down that's on another slide.
But I think one of the things to recognize in this is that we're an active member of the ACT group that's trying to work on this situation a little bit. It's an area of concern that the ACT group, the bonding of the various coastal communities is an important part of trying to help control some of the East Coast or some of the coastal growth. Okay?
What is the acronym? What is that?
Association of Coastal Towns. And there's another group that we're on the periphery of called ABC, which is the Association of Bay Communities.
Oh, okay.
So that goes from Lewis on up to Pickering and all the way up.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
No,
I don't think I've heard of that.
Kind of on the hinge.
Right, and so,
Is that a very active group?
actually, it's an interesting group because they're not only concerned about residential properties and commercial properties, but they're very concerned about farmland loss. Because they have, and I've been to some of their meetings, and they have a couple of farmers, particularly one woman who is in the farming industry, and she's spoken quite strongly about the loss of tillable farmland through saltwater intrusion.
Oh, through intrusion, not through subdivision.
Oh, no, it has nothing to do with subdivisions.
Isn't that interesting?
Loss of-
Good for her.
Loss of tillable land that way.
How far north was she?
Okay,
Do you remember?
so we're going to
About
move into the
Bowers.
two big topics.
Oh, goody.
Our final two topics, future land use.
Now that we're done with the light hors d'oeuvres, now we can...
Yeah, let's get into the heavy,
The meat of the subject, just so to
main
speak.
meal. That the position is Lewis is primarily a residential community with considerable areas of open space and vacant land. In addition, Lewis has local businesses to serve residents and visitors, and the city will adhere to the future land use map in all decisions affecting land use within the city boundaries.
I'm curious as to where the vast expanses of vacant land are. I would say with very limited vacant land.
Amen.
Which makes it even that much more important that we're judicious in how it's developed.
But I read,
And we
I
adhere to
don't
the-
know where it is in the comp plan.
almost 60%.
There's like 53% of Lewis is open space.
Open space, but that's marsh.
Marsh.
It's marsh.
Yeah, so here's
So we need to, okay, but,
Yeah, that's identified elsewhere in the comp plan.
That's the only reason
Right.
it is open space, because
right, because it's marsh, right.
Right, and
Yeah, so if you take a look at the future land use map, well, yeah, it looks like we have a ton of open space, but we're talking wetlands, marshland, et cetera, beach.
God for water.
And then the rest of it is designated for, so your yellow is your residential,
Right.
Right,
your red is commercial,
yep.
your purple is industrial, and you can see there's 4, and it's actually 3, because this one I took from the comp plan, and I haven't updated
Yep, you have
the one on the comp plan page, because we're down to 3. The
Right.
blue is the institutional, so the hospital, the university, the ferry, and then you're looking at, parks, utilities, streams, canals, and I don't see a whole lot of brown, which is vacant. Again, it's a very small.
Oh, wait a minute.
This is the future land use plan
They
of
must
the
have missed
city.
that.
Inaccessible, it's just open space, and you can't go to it.
Oh, that's wrong.
It's
what
a
I'm
beach
saying.
Palm Island, it's all posted, stay off,
This, yes.
I do think, though, that the position is very misleading, because I would agree we have considerable areas of open space, but vacant land, we don't have much of.
Yeah.
And I think that
That's what
it's
was- yeah.
misleading in that way.
And identify what you mean by open space.
Exactly, because,
Yeah, I think we need to, it's protected open space is really what we have.
Well, unless you can.
It's environmentally
It's
sensitive.
undevelopable per state
Right.
and federal law.
And not only that, we are in our new subdivisions, such as the Lewis Waterfront Preserve, what we were considering last night during the hearing. Those open spaces are all privately held. They are not public open spaces. So there's a big distinction.
Right.
Big distinction.
So those are, but those I would put under the category of vacant land. It's undeveloped, but it's in play.
Well, we gotta make sure that we identify each category that we're talking about here, because
Right.
it's quite different.
What I was just describing, for example, at Lewis Waterfront Preserve, the plan that's been approved, free, that's what
Okay,
I'm
the
saying.
open space
The
is
open
there.
space is
Oh,
there,
private,
right.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha,
got it.
sorry.
So
Right.
so that would show up differently on the existing land use plan.
Yeah.
But the future one, that's going to show up as residential because it's a residential use.
Exactly.
Even though it's open space,
It's not
it's
ours.
not,
Right.
it's a different type of open space.
Yes, it's a
tied to
different type.
residential. So you
Right.
actually see all that yellow
Yep.
in the subdivisions.
Yep.
We didn't call out the specific open space
I
within the
understand.
developments because
And
it's
that's-
more of a residential
And that's
use.
where, that's an example where words matter. The word choice is important, and we need to create a different word to describe that kind of open space. Janelle, I'm going to make another well, it's not a throwaway comment, but it's a suggestion I'd just like to put out here. I have spent a lot of time, many occasions, looking at the map, and that map is virtually useless because it's so small, you can't possibly really read it correctly. And it lends itself for great inaccuracies to be able to read it. And my question would be, going forward, I'd like to make sure that we have a map that is more legible, and especially an electronic version, but in the print version, it's not much use.
Janelle, do we have the data, the GIS layers for that?
I have to look because I have an older version, and I've been trying to track down this version so I can make sure everything is updated. Because as we amend the comp plan, I need to amend that.
Right.
And it is on my list of things, my GIS list of items,
Right.
is to create a GIS map that would function like our interactive zoning map.
Okay.
So, okay.
Well, the last one you showed us talks about the MOU with the need to review the annexation MOU with the BPW. All of that needs to be revised.
And again, that's been completed.
Right.
So
there may be other things we want to put in
We don't have to revise
there.
things that we've done. We want to actually go kind of, celebrate the things we've done.
Right.
So again, what we want to look at is that policy and position still making sense for the future?
Right.
And then if we've done something or we want to continue to do something, we leave it there because we want to show progress.
Okay.
And then if there's things we need to add or tweak, that's what we add.
Okay.
Because again, I think that's something we want to look at. Because if we start rewriting everything, then we're kind of like rewriting the entire comp plan, and that's not the intent for a 5-year review.
Right.
It's, some places will go, yep, everything's working fine. Others will we want to change a few things here and there. But I think here we're going to get a little bit more in depth that we need to we've noticed as the 5 years have gone on, or a little bit longer since 2015, that things have popped up that we need to clarify and make sure we're recognizing.
I think we're definitely going to have to kind of let this all sink in after this evening and think about what is the scope we want for the 5-year review. Do we want to do an addendum that provides kind of a view of what the changes are, and given the changes, what strategies and recommendations weren't there that we want to make sure that we focus on? We could do what Janelle said and do a full-blown update, but that's an undertaking. That's a year
That's a huge
two-year
undertaking.
project.
And that's an assignment that we would put on the planning commission, and
Right.
that, yeah.
Well,
And Drew has spoken, the chair has spoken about conducting a review, but I have no idea what his idea is, what his vision is, but I haven't heard that it included a full rewrite.
Right. I mean, that's a big project.
That is a big project.
It's not a big,
Right,
it's a
and
huge
again, I think
project.
the deadline is
I was here for the
at
last
the
one.
end
you
of
know,
2022.
it's not-
It's like mid-2022.
Right.
When we have to have the update. So I think we also have to make sure we're balancing,
Yep.
again, are there things that are working fine? Are there
Exactly.
things not working fine? Are there things that just need to be updated
Sure,
slightly?
that's a good point.
I think we have some substantial updates to do,
Yes.
but I really think
And don't take it any further than that.
I wouldn't do a complete rewrite in 5 years,
Absolutely.
if we can avoid it.
And in fact, that's actually a good question. In 5 years, Janelle, we're at the midpoint right now. In 5 years, could we do a similar kind of review?
No.
Or
that's
is that, you have to do the big one?
You have to do the big one.
So right now, we're just looking at making some changes to the policies and recommendations.
Right.
And we can do that at the 10-year review, but the 10-year, we're also going to take a little bit deeper dive
Okay.
into the population information. We're going to take a look, a deeper dive.
Okay.
Right now, we want to it sounds like the plan isn't going the path we thought it was going to go.
Right.
So we need to get it back on to the path.
Correcting the course.
It's winding a little bit, and we want to get that straight path.
Right.
So that's what we're looking to do. In 10 years, you want to take a deeper dive,
Right.
to make sure everything's been given a good look and a review.
Thank you.
You don't actually have to totally rewrite the plan at 10 years, but you do have to do a thorough review to make sure everything is still relevant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I saved annexation for last. The position, Lewis is interested in expanding city boundaries in order to have more control over surrounding development and, where possible, to add areas that are now served by the Lewis Board of Public Works. And Lewis is interested in expanding its boundaries in order to have more control over surrounding development and protect its well fields.
Don't everybody speak at once.
Yeah, I was like, crickets.
This is going to be, I'll be bold here, folks.
I've heard on both sides.
Would that be different?
So I think this is going to be something we definitely want to take a good look at to make sure that, is this the policy that the city's intending to do? And is that, and again, we're not just looking a year or two down the road. We're looking 20, 30 years down the road. Is this the policy of the city?
Just a minute, I'll give you a voice. Go, Tim.
This is a very serious topic, and I think it requires a lot of thought and discussion. I am very skeptical of the statement that is put forth here in the policy statement, and also the position statement, especially the position statement where it declares that Lewis is interested in expanding the city boundaries. There is a business case to be made for any kind of decision this government takes or makes, and unless we can prove in that there is a business case that makes economic sense for us to annex, I am highly doubtful that annexation is something that should be a policy that we just go blindly forward.
Well, I don't think this says we're going blindly forward. It just says Lewis is interested.
I understand
in expanding.
I understand that.
I mean, I think it's a pretty neutral statement. I mean, not neutral, it's innocuous in many ways. It's not.
Well, it states, it's a declarative statement that says that Lewis is interested in expanding its boundaries.
interested.
Right.
Well, that's different than saying would be open to.
Exactly.
Interested implies that you're proactively seeking it. What be open to is what really annexation should be, which is people approaching you and saying, we'd like to be part of your town.
Okay, I think you also need to look at this in terms of, the CPC end of the PPW before you just change it completely. CPC end of the PPW goes all the way out to Old Orchard Road,
Okay.
okay? And, do we want that to be the boundary of the city eventually? Could it
Can you
ever?
go to the map?
Well, I'm always talking about it.
Can you zoom in on it a little?
Yeah, can you enlarge it? We can't possibly see it.
Unfortunately,
taking on
give me
all
just,
this
let
new
me, give me just a minute. I'll
development all
bring up a
over
different
the road.
version.
Well,
Because if you're going all the way up to Orchard.
okay, so look at what's going on. You've got all the 17 properties going out Savannah Road that the BPW is they're looking to serve. But-
The state lots?
No, I'm talking about Savannah Road. not-
Oh, Savannah, okay.
He's by the high school entrance.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, so you're going up
Right,
there.
those,
So you're already there.
Okay.
I think we would like to be able to annex the high school and be able to put Jones Farm into the city.
and that has been an identified priority that we've mentioned before.
There's a business case, I'm going to remind everyone, there's a business case for a decision like this. The school will not produce 1 penny of tax.
That's correct.
And the adjacent office that's used by the school board does not produce 1 penny of real estate tax. So leave it.
I will also just add, Milton is looking at this now in terms of an expansion. What will that mean over the next 20 years? To them, it apparently means they're going to have to add 6 more policemen over the course of that time and so on.
There's a
And
cost.
these are the things instead of,
Well, I think we need to look at this very carefully before we wait. This is not a decision we can arrive at tonight. I hear your case about a business case, but I think we need to look at this. We need to overlay this district with what the CPCN is for the board, and see what makes sense and what doesn't. We're already have talked about Tower Hill, and that's already, they're serving that. So, I don't see us going all the way out to Route 1, but I do see the possibility that we may, we certainly would like to, I think, include Jones Farm, and that means we have to think about the high school. Right now, they're not interested.
Right. We've tried.
We have tried a couple of times. Fred and you actually had meetings with Bob Fulton.
Yeah, but we also gave a presentation to the school board, and they, at that point, did not want to come in.
So I think we need to really, let's overlay this with the CPCN that the board has, and come back to this, rather than trying to iron this out tonight. I hear your point, And the other part
the other thing we may want to clarify here is whether we, as a city, want to continue to annex in properties that exist and already along Gill's Neck, whether that's something that the city...
Yeah, because that's kind of piecemeal over there, the way we do it right now.
Well, it's not, Gill's Neck, it's not piecemeal at all.
Well, that one little area, it seems like this is the only thing that's been annexed in, isn't it? On the right-hand side, I can't think of the name of it.
On Gill's Neck?
Talking about, on Gill's
On
Neck?
Gill's Neck, yeah.
Oh, you're talking,
What's the name of that? We were over there the other day, and it's, are they townhouses?
You're talking about Admiral's Chase?
Yes.
That's a pre-annexation agreement. That's not in the city.
that is not,
There's a pre-annexation
so the
agreement.
pre-annexation agreement over there, and the board is serving them with water and sewer.
And sewer.
Okay, that's what that is.
What's happening there is they're not actually providing the sewer service, they're building the infrastructure for the development. It will be tied into the county sewer. That is actually pumping their effluent to our wastewater treatment plant for processing.
Yeah, so they're just doing it, so it's, rather than have redundancy in a distribution system, they're using the county system because it can be transported to the same plant.
Okay.
That's an economic decision,
Okay.
and that's a business decision.
All right. But I think we need to look at this, and there's some more information that I think is germane to this discussion.
Absolutely. It's a big issue.
It is
And
huge.
with lots of consequences. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
What
Is
else?
that everything?
What else do you want to talk about, Janelle?
The last one was questions, and that was the end of my presentation, was to discuss
Okay.
annexation.
Thank you, Janelle.
Okay, thank you very much. I think,
Is there anyone else on that? No one else on that?
just Charlie.
No, we have some attendees there, don't we?
I don't,
I can't
what does that
see.
say?
I don't think so.
Oh, Beth Ennis?
Elizabeth, that's Dave Ennis's.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Anyone want to raise your hand and not say something? No.
Not say so.
I guess the question I have is, what's our next step from here? Is the planning commission going to get involved in this process?
Well, so what I would suggest, and one of the other things that really made me think we need to look at this is the comments made by planning commission members when they voted on Old Town at White's Pond, said to me that they're not happy with the framework that we've set. So I think, I would think that either you all think about what you want for the scope for the review, and then give that as a direction to the planning commission, or you work with them collaboratively in a joint
I
session.
think we have one more session where we talk about this, and then we have the joint session with the planning commission. That would be my recommendation. Let's kind of get ourselves.
Right, I mean, there's a lot to digest.
We're walking on a very gelatinous base right now.
Right.
And I think if we can come together a little bit more, and with some of the notes that Janelle has from tonight,
Right.
then I think we can talk through that and then have a joint meeting with the planning committee.
Right, that'd be good.
And I think if you guys have any comments that you want to get to me, so I can kind of update some of these items.
Okay.
Because then I can bring that back to you guys and we can discuss those.
Okay, great.
All right, and do we have a meeting date the next time we come
I think
together?
we'll float some dates. Let Janelle get some, are you ready to meet every Thursday night and every Monday and Tuesday as well?
I absolutely, sign me up. I have no life. I have no life.
Please, Rick.
Yeah, please.
Should I get my bed, move my bed into my office now?
Actually, we're going to turn this room, we're going to turn this into a dormitory. We're all just going to take up residence.
Perfect.
Right, which
I need a toothbrush.
Thank you. And it has nothing to do with, if I'm out of line, just say you're out of line. But I just have all, the administration and the council up here. How does the city, like a citizen, propose that the members of this council, and I'm not even sure what they are compensated for their time to serve this city, how does that procedure go to start a petition or whatever it is to get increased their
Well, it's already in the, it's already,
brought up already.
the council's already, the council already has it in their code.
But how do they get an increase? Because
They have to vote on it.
They can vote
The
on
members
it.
of this table
I
have to
can
vote on
just
it.
tell you from a citizen, the amount of time that you guys
Thanks,
serve.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
And I'm at odds with you a lot,
Remember
but
how early I
I
brought
believe
that
you
up
guys.
today? Said you better believe that's gonna
Oh, your wife, thank you.
A penny an hour, not a cent more.
I think Brew calculated
For your
it.
information, when I first came on, the first thing I said to Anne Marie is, "You're kidding, right?" You better look at this. So I said, "You gotta look at this, baby."
Okay. To be continued. Okay, so Janelle, we'll look at this and maybe sometime mid-September, we can get back together on this, mid to third week in September.
So like maybe in 2 weeks, you guys can get me all your comments. so
Let's
that
get
I
through
can
our city
compare
council
to the-
meeting and, yeah, let's look at that third
That
week in
sound fair?
September, okay?
Okay.
So comments to Janelle not later than,
What's today?
you're going to be
Let's say
away, Leo.
the-
Comment a week from tomorrow, a week from
Could we say
Friday?
the 10th?
I was going to say exactly, as far as.
You're going to be away though.
I'll be away, but I can still send.
Okay, so let's have comments to you not later than the 10th.
Thank you.
That'll give you enough time?
Plenty of time.
Okay, great, thanks.
That'll get
So comments
plenty
for
of
the
time.
Yeah, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Rick, thank you for coming.
Have a good
Thank you.
evening.
Have a nice evening, Janelle.
Thank you, Rick.
Good night.
Great thing about meeting here and not the Rollins Center is I don't